Apophenia is the human ability or tendency to see or perceive patterns that do not exist. So the most classic example of this is if you just go to Google right now and type in apophenia, you'll see a little smiley face. So the smiley face is the circle, two little circles inside that circle, and the little upturned line at the bottom. So when you see that, right, you immediately associate that with the face. It's called the smiley face. Maybe going back to grade school or elementary school, you've always known that to be associated with the face. This is a connection that's been built up over time. If you look at the shapes, there's an obvious similarity between a real human face, most human faces who have normal features. There's two eyes, two circular eyes, not perfect circles, but they're circular, and there's a mouth, right? But the smiley face is not a face. It is three circles and an upturned line that are supposed to represent a face. Your human ability, your mental ability, is to see that and associate that with a real face. You have to do this sort of transfiguration in your mind to be able to do that, right? It's like a little skill, right? If you don't get what I'm talking about, I'll give a couple more examples and maybe you'll get it. Okay, so the first thing is the smiley face. The other thing would be say the Rorschach test or cloud, because that's more blurry. It's not a pure, perfect geometric shape. It's something blurrier, but yeah, maybe something you still see that. Maybe something you can make. You can still make something out of that. You can still see a butterfly or a caterpillar or a dog or whatever you want to see in the clouds of the Rorschach test, right? But you sort of take out the blurriness of it and try to sort of project a more fixed outline, a more accurate outline. You try to remove the blurriness, and maybe you think, oh well, now that looks like something that, and you associate that cloud or that blot with a real thing that you know. And this could be, okay. So what I'm talking about now, those first two examples, those first three examples, that's actually, they look similar. Maybe the cloud does look mysteriously bunny-esque or something like this, but maybe there's something more random, like if you roll dice or die all over the time, all the time, or not all the time, but a bunch of times, and you think you see some sort of pattern in that. As long as the dice are pretty well weighted, there won't be a pattern. It won't go 1, 3, 8, 1, 3, 6, right? There's no 8 on the die, right? But there won't be it's like after a 5 I always get a 4. That won't happen, right? That's just your brain sort of seeing something that definitely isn't there, not seeing something that's close to something else and making the jump, but just completely making something up whole cloth, right? Okay, so this is sort of an interesting concept for esports, because when you talk about teams, or when you talk about tournaments, or you talk about players, you don't talk of the player in and of itself. Like, you won't say, oh, this player went into this game, got 18 kills, went into that game and got 12 kills, went into another game and got 21 kills. It's very uninteresting. It's like, well, he had 13 kills right when his team was in the finals and needed him, and he had this really bad performance, or maybe he had his best performance of the tournament right in the game where all the other star of the team or the star of the team didn't show up, and he just showed up as needed. Like, you can sort of create a storyline from looking at the data in context with the rest of his teammates. Or, you talk about a team and how they've done before a player joined or after a player joined, and see if there's some sort of pattern there. You can talk, you can do this sort of pattern recognition. You can look at the results and factors in those results and sort of make a narrative, make a storyline. And that's part of I think that's part of the content creation that's almost necessary to creating good content. Because, even in esports, there's that weird thing where people who are playing the games, like, if you just look at them on a camera, like their bodies, right, without the screens, what they're doing is just hitting keys and moving their mouse. And if you don't have the code, if you don't know what that translates into, if you don't have that pattern recognition, seeing that, oh, right now he's doing that awesome op flick, or he's positioning himself like he's staying still in this one spot because he knows a player's probably gonna not check it, because it's an off angle or something like this. So your ability to perceive not just the data, but what that data can represent makes it interesting. And this is sort of, I think, what you have to do, what you should do if you create interesting content. I did an article recently where I compared SK with Phelps to SK with FNX and SK with Fox, right? Yeah, Fox. For that two tournaments, yeah, 2 tournaments with Fox, and I tried to say how the new personnel would affect their play style and how that play style would affect their certain players' numbers or their output, and how overall that might affect their standing within the competitive scene. So the one change in seeing how the pattern would replicate for the next couple times since the addition of Phelps to the 2 tournaments, DreamHack Vegas and IEM Katowice, right? Okay, so this sort of thing can be, obviously, that's how you'd apply it to content. Or you can do something more metaphorical. Stucci released an article yesterday where he talked about how certain players get associated with being called villains, and how that can help create interesting dynamics and increase your engagement with the esport, whatever that be. With that, whatever that player competes in, whatever that villain competes in, right? So this can be recognizing that a player has a sort of characteristics of a villains to texturize or to associate that player as a villain can help, to make that association, to find that pattern can be helpful and interesting and entertaining, right? Okay, Okay, but this could be sort of a problem, I guess, if you're concerned about being correct. So I'll give an example of how you can be very incorrect, right, with this pattern association, or maybe not very incorrect, but just how it can, your ability to make these connections can mislead you. So let's have a team, and say they are playing CT side, and they have to eco, let's say 4 times over the course of a half. Now, that team is, okay, let's say they're SK, so SK Gaming. That will, okay, so they eco 4 times over the course of a half, and let's say the opposing team, opposing team charges a certain site, or like goes, every team has to sort of go to a certain site. Now, let's just say that they don't do like a split or something. They just, all 5 men go to one site. And let's say on those 4 ecos, SK stack the site that the enemy is going to correct. Like they know before the round, they don't do any information plays, they don't use sound cues, and they just know before the round, or they just happen to be in the same direction or in the same site all 4 times, right? So the likelihood of them just guessing, just flipping a coin and going to the right site 4 times in a row, or 4 times over the course of a half, all 4 of their anti-ecos, or ecos when the other team is anti-ecoing, is very low. So it's like 6.25% chance, 50% chance to get it right 1 time, 25% 2 times, 3 times in a row would be 12.5%. So yeah, 6.25 would be 4 times in a row just guessing, just complete guesswork, not using any other information. So that's a pretty low number. If they're just guessing, it's a very low likelihood that they would have correctly stacked all 4 times. Now, okay, when you think about SK Gaming, you think, well, how could this, let's say this happened, 100% this happened, and you're between halves, you're trying to figure this out, and you're trying to think of a way to how this could have happened, and they didn't do any sound cues, or they didn't hear any sound cues, didn't make any information plays. Well, how could they have known? Well, maybe you think, okay, this happened, this low likelihood event happened, but you also know that for a fact that, well, not for a fact, but from your past experiences that Fallen is a very highly respected, very talented, well, talented is a weird word to use for in-game leader, very respected, very studious, very accomplished in-game leader. And say you want to merge those two. It's like, well, there's maybe the reason why they stacked correctly all 4 times is because Fallen did a lot of demo work, or he understands how to read the opponent, or he knows the pattern, or like he knows what site they tend to go to if they're on anti-eco, so he can sort of mess with the percentages. So maybe it isn't as low as 6.25, right? So he has sort of the ability to bridge that gap between the 2 points, right? You're bridging the gap, and his ability is sort of the other point, right? His in-game leading prowess, right? Now, there's a lot of Counter-Strike games played. If Counter-Strike matches get played out and an in-game leader does this stacked sites every eco over thousands of times, this is going to happen. It's like someone's going to guess correctly 4 times in a row. It'll happen sooner or later. It's a low percentage chance, but over enough iterations, it will happen. Multiple times, like the keyboard monkey sort of situation. Like what's the joke? It's like monkeys banging on keyboards for eternity will someday write out Hamlet perfectly, right? Because that's just what infinity is. Sooner or later, they'll just hit the right combination of keys, right? Even though it's like infinitely small over an infinite long timeline, a large enough time scale, it'll happen, right? So, and so that you could have been wrong, with enough guesswork, it could happen. And say, if you make this call mid-game, you have no idea what Fallen or SK did to correctly, or to move to the appropriate sites. You don't know what their thought process was. They could have been flipping coins. You have no idea, right? Could be an example when you're wrong, when you're making a connection that clearly doesn't exist at all. It's not like it's close and you're just making the jump. This is you just inventing something. Even though this is a good theory, right? It's perfectly reasonable, perfectly acceptable. That's a good guess, I would say, as to why they could correctly stack the right site 4 times over the course of the half, all 4 times. And there's ways of guarding against being wrong. You can look at the percentages. You can compare percentages to be more accurate. Look at other in-game leaders' success rate, and then maybe percentages of like how often certain teams go to certain sites. So maybe using that, that the way that SK Guess wasn't completely random, or wasn't as 50% time. Maybe they had a much greater percentage of being right than you initially assumed. Maybe it was like a 60% chance of being right just because of how the map plays out, or a 70% chance. So that's a possibility. Or the other thing is you can just ask them after the game. Now that you don't know if they're going to be completely truthful, they might try to make themselves look better by saying, "Oh yeah, no, I did all my research. I knew they were going to go there, even though it was a complete guess." Or there could just be a language barrier, or you don't. Yeah, you can never know if they're being completely truthful on that front, right? It's hard to tell. So, it's not. I mean, that helps you confirm your theory if they can help. If they say verbally that, yeah, that's what we did. It makes it a highly likelihood that your theory is correct, even though it's not, perfect. But I mean, when you think about this problem, I don't know how much it's how problematic it is for you to make theories and guesses and make connect patterns without actually knowing for certain if you're correct or not. I mean, that's sort of the beauty of content creation. It can just be entertainment or food for thought, or a new model, or a different understanding of something. It doesn't have to be the orthodox, the correct, the exact way a player on that team would understand what you're describing. I talked about the SK article earlier. When I didn't know that SK did interviews talking about sort of the problem with Phelps. I saw those just as I was finishing the article, and I added a little quote in as I saw that come out with it was an interview with Cold Zero, but there's others with Fallen, I think, and Taco. Yeah, I think Taco did one too, and they were saying sort of the similar stuff, that they were playing too aggressively, and then that sort of affected their play style, right? It's sort of my theory got confirmed by, or better confirmed or more is a highly my theory is more likely to be true now that they've said it. But I don't know, even if they disagree with me, even if they said that no, I don't think our play styles changed that much at all. I think my theory is still valid as long as I'm not completely wrong. If you look at the play style of SK and you think there's something to what I'm saying, that's validating. That's perfectly acceptable. This is interesting content, right? It doesn't, right and wrong are concepts that maybe are too heavily emphasized by fans or people who are critical of content creators. So that's sort of an interesting place to start. I think it's a good place to start for the first on-camera video of my channel, my YouTube channel. Just sort of a refrain, I think, with my content. I think should be trying to do interesting, original pattern recognition, doing interesting storylines, making interesting comparisons, rather than focusing on this sort of very orthodoxical, very black and white viewpoint of the world. It's like, if it's wrong, it's bad, or if it's not perfectly accurate, it can't possibly be good content. It's about how compelling it is, or how engaging it is, or if accuracy. You can't just make things up whole cloth, but it's more about to me at least, and I hope people who are fans of my channel will agree, this is more about how interesting it is, how engaging it is. Okay, thanks.